Welcome everybody to my latest Zoom talk, political Zoom talk with Kimberly Atkins, my colleague at the Boston Globe, at least till the end of today. This is my last day at the Boston Globe. Kim, of course, is a Globe opinion columnist and the co-host of a new podcast called Sisters in Law, which focuses on prominent women talking about, women reporters talking about the law, hence Sisters in Law. Good name, by the way. Is that your
Thank
idea?
you.
I like it a lot, actually. It's a good name.
Thank you.
And by the way, let me say for the record, Kim, as I've mentioned before on our conversations, has the best backdrop I've seen of anybody during the pandemic era, and it actually got better. It got better. And
Thank
that
you
is
so
something
much.
when you quit journalism, you should go into design because it really is phenomenal what you're doing here. The color, the space. Look at mine. Mine is just whatever, but yours is gorgeous.
Yours looks like somebody who is about the work, who is about the business,
About the books, I guess maybe you
I
might
like
say.
it.
And as you see right back here, of course, subliminally, my book's up there. So you can
Nice.
Anyway,
Nice. You got to give me a copy so I can throw it on mine.
I got to send you a copy so you have one for your bookshelf. Okay, enough about our rooms. Let's talk about politics. So this was the week of the impeachment trial. And when we're recording this on Friday morning, and when this goes live, we'll already have probably been into day 3 of the impeachment. How's it going so far? What do you think, Kim?
Yeah, well, for the impeachment managers, I think they have laid out a very strong case for impeachment. I mean, it's important to remember that there's one article of impeachment, one charge, essentially, and that is incitement, incitement of the insurrection that we saw at the Capitol on January 6th. And the impeachment managers went through and really methodically showed that not just on January 6th, but for weeks leading up to it, that there was this really 3-prong attack that was launched by Donald Trump. And it was first to continue to spread lies about fraud in an election that never happened. Then it was to invite basically his supporters to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, not by accident. That's the day that lawmakers were meeting to count the already certified electoral votes.
Right.
And then hold this rally and then direct the people who came, the thousands of people who followed his instructions and came to the Capitol to, quote, stop the steal. And then we saw what ensued. So really, the case was made very well, very clearly, very vividly, including with videos that were really shocking that we saw for the first time of what was happening inside, the way that so many lawmakers came so close to being right in the face of danger in the middle of that deadly insurrection. So it really, the only defense to this is for lawmakers, the Republicans in the Senate, who are signaling that they're already just don't want to convict.
Right.
It's no longer a legal case, right? It's just
Right.
a political calculation that they're making, because I can't imagine a defense to what was clearly laid out.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You mentioned the videos, and I want to talk a little bit more about what you said in the beginning. But the one thing that I just keep thinking about is this video they showed, a surveillance video of Officer Eugene Goodman, who, of course, we all know from who stopped the mob from getting into the Senate. We've all seen that video. But this was a new video of Goodman running down a hallway, seeing Senator Mitt Romney on the way, and basically saying, "Turn around, there's a mob coming this way." And I couldn't get that out of my head, because I think about the fact that if Goodman wasn't running down that hall at that time, that moment, what would have happened to Mitt Romney? I mean, would this mob would he have met the mob? Would they have hurt him? I mean, would he have survived? I mean, it is a terrifying thought to think about how close. Mitt Romney is not popular among Trump fans at all.
Correct. And he's very well recognized. He's recognizable.
Absolutely.
He's a former presidential candidate. And so these rioters would have absolutely recognized him, and known that he voted once to impeach Donald Trump, to remove Donald Trump from office, and that he was not somebody who they would see who was on their side. Right after Donald Trump gave a speech, and when he talked about, some senators being weak,
Yes.
Not all of them being strong, they would have identified him as a weak one. And so I think you're right. I think he was in grave danger in
Grave
that
danger.
moment and was
Grave danger.
saved by Officer Goodman, who, as you said, was was even more heroic than we knew
Yes,
from his
exactly.
earlier actions.
So I think in that sense, that was, to me, was really harrowing to see. But to your point about the methodical presentation, one thing I was really struck by was this wasn't about January 6th. This was about the month that came before. This was about everything that Trump had done to prime his people to view the election as stolen, right? And you think about this for a second. He talked about the election being stolen in the spring and summer, months before the election even took place. I mean, he was priming them for, if he lost, to think this was going to be stolen from him. And I was really struck by the connection that Jamie Raskin made between the stuff happened in Michigan in April when these extremists, armed extremists, invaded the state capitol in Michigan. He basically encouraged them. He told Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, to basically find a way to work with them. And then after there was this kidnapping plot where a number of men were arrested for trying to kidnap her, he mocked her about it. I mean, so from that perspective, he was encouraging this kind of violence. He was encouraging these kind of responses to this kind of political response, if you will, a political violence to something you don't like. And so I think that, to me, was extremely effective, not just in sort of making the case for the incitement goes back before January, but also as creating a historical record for what Trump has done as president. I mean, there is really no way to escape the fact that this was an ongoing effort on his part to prime his followers to use violence to help him stay in office.
I think you're absolutely right with that. I mean, going back, he knew that there was this plot against the governor of Michigan. He was aware of this, yet he
Sure.
continued the same sort of rhetoric, continued the same sort of calls to his supporters to continue to quote unquote fight like hell,
Right.
in order to back against it. He wasn't asking them to engage in some sort of democratic process.
No,
He
no.
was doing the opposite, and he did it for a period of time. And I think that is really that was very telling. I think also telling is the fact, as the impeachment managers laid out, that hours passed even after this insurrection began. Donald Trump, he's the president of the United States. So he knew, even before we did, how dangerous that situation was inside the Capitol once
Yes.
the Capitol parameter was
Yes.
breached. So
Yes.
he knew what was happening there. Just because he has access to that intelligence, he would have been notified by the Secret Service the minute that Mike Pence was put in danger. So he was aware of that as well. And the evidence is that the calls that he made were not he did not immediately go to Twitter to tell the people who he'd sent there to retreat. He did not go on television and tell them to retreat. He started making calls, not to Mike Pence, but to senators, Republican senators in the chamber, who told him that Mike Pence had just been evacuated.
Yeah.
And he still didn't stop it. I mean, he clearly, I think before this, it was, you assumed that because so much time passed before he gave, first he gave a statement that seemed to be throwing fuel on the fire and praising these people, before he reluctantly gave this video message telling them to back off, but remember this day forever and be proud, essentially, and that he loved them. But it was so clear when you got this, and Senator Tuberville just yesterday to a reporter confirming that
he did confirm
he was called, and that he told the president that Mike Pence had been evacuated. So all of this together, for both the impeachment. Go ahead.
So no. So to your point, I don't know if you saw this, but article in the Washington Post today, which basically sort of argued that he tweeted something about Pence after he knew that Pence had been evacuated.
Yes.
That as if he was almost saying to the crowd, "Get him! He's on the loose. You got to find him." I mean, it was no effort to try to protect Pence, but it had to put him in greater danger. It's extraordinary.
It really is. It really is. So I think the case, the case was very strongly made. And I think so two things could happen now. Either enough members of the Senate can be swayed to come to a vote of 67 to hold him accountable, or we will have to trust both history and voters to hold accountable everyone who doesn't hold the president accountable. That's less, it's less immediate. It doesn't protect our democracy in the same way, in an immediate way.
In any way.
Yeah. So that if that is the best that we can hope for, it seems the reporting is that we will not get a conviction, and we have to figure out how, as a nation, we protect our democracy and what the impeachment power even means after the day that vote is taken.
So I want to talk to you about that a second. I mean, look, I think you and I have probably written more words than we can care to remember about the cowardice of congressional Republicans. And there is truly no bottom when it comes to the level of cowardice and enabling of Donald Trump. But this one, I've struggled for a couple of days now to get my head around it. The complete lack of moral compass, the lack of integrity, the lack of self confidence or self-respect, really, to watch what's happening, to see what Trump did. And the thing, by the way, I'm just making an aside here. The House managers made this point that Trump was delighted by the violence, that he wondered why the White House staff were so upset about the violence, because he thought his way to help him. I mean, this is sociopathic behavior. It really is. I mean, the complete lack of empathy, the total indifference to people being hurt. And yet they're going to acquit him because they think it's in their political interest to do so. And let's just cut out the BS that they think there's some constitutional reason not to do this. And we all know that's not true. How do we process this? How do we process the fact that you have senators who have such little fealty to the Constitution, to basic democratic norms, to basic, appropriate behavior, that they're willing to do nothing about this? How do we process it?
Difficult. I mean, I keep thinking about other times where I've come across people who were unwilling to speak the truth freely, or unwilling to say something for fear that they would suffer retribution from whatever leaders. It's not even a political leader right now. He's a leader of the party, but he's not in office right now. And it was in places like Cuba. It was in places like China that I came across that as a reporter.
Yeah.
And it's really shocking and disturbing to see that happening in the United States. I mean, I think about, watching reports and reading about the coup in Myanmar that was happening. And the similarities to January 6th are unnerving. And that's precisely why we have the Constitution. That's precisely why we have these protections. And the founders put the power to keep a president in check, to prevent him from turning into an authoritarian, to prevent him from turning into a dictator. They gave that power to the Senate in the impeachment power.
Yeah.
And to see them, I mean, you have to think about this. It's not just about what happened that day, what Trump said, was it the First Amendment? No, step back and look at what's happening. This was an attempt to overthrow a democratic election.
Yes.
If this happened in any other country, the United States would sanction them, would denounce it. The UN would get involved. This is what happened here in the United States of America. And the lever, the check on that, it's not about punishing Donald Trump. It's about protecting the democracy. And these lawmakers are putting their own political calculation, a calculation that doesn't even make sense either, but they're putting their calculation first. And think about it. If they were so afraid of Trump, if they want to get rid of him, as it's reported that Mitch McConnell does, this is the chance.
This is the time to do it. This is
how you do it. You get rid of him, he can never come back. Exactly.
And yet they won't do it. We know they won't do it. And I take your point. I mean, this is, I mean, I keep seeing the House managers saying this is the worst crime a president can commit. And I truly believe that to be true, actually. I mean, I don't know that you can get any worse than trying to overturn an actual election, which is what Trump tried to do. Make no mistake. He tried to overturn the election. And to make it even worse, he sent his own supporters to literally invade a co-equal branch of government, the Congress in order to affect that outcome. I mean, what can you even say? How he should be impeached, unanimously. I mean, he should be convicted unanimously. The other thing I came away from watching this was that he should be prosecuted for this. I mean, what he did is a crime. And it is just mind-boggling to watch these senators who spent years, by the way, when Obama was president, complaining about, Benghazi or accusing him of violating the Constitution, literally just ignoring the evidence that is right in front of them. I really genuinely makes me fear for the future of America when you have people in positions of political power who believe this and who are so cynical that they are willing to sit back and do nothing in the face of such obvious criminal behavior by the President of the United States. I have nothing even to say anymore. It's an insane moment. It's an insane moment.
It is. I mean, I think as you were saying that, Michael, I was reminded about Donald Trump saying how he can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose any political support. This is worse.
This is worse.
This is worse than shooting someone on Fifth Avenue. I mean, there have been a lot of comparisons made to that statement to things like, I thought he passed Fifth Avenue with the COVID response, frankly. That was already worse.
Yes.
But this goes so far beyond that. And the sad thing is, politically, he was right. Politically, he is proving to be right because his supporters are still behind him. And as to the issue of a crime, it could have been a crime. There is reporting that he could face charges in DC for incitement of violence, which is a felony. There has been reported that there is a criminal investigation that's been opened in Georgia in relation to his efforts there to pressure state officials to try to find enough votes to call the election in his favor. But I think it's also important to remember when it comes to the law, criminal laws are meant to do different things. They're meant to deter behavior and punish behavior. And I think about Marco Rubio's tweet, which I wrote a column about today in the Globe, suggesting that the existence of criminal laws sort of somehow absolves them of their responsibility that they took an oath to constitutionally, and it doesn't. Those are two separate things. Both of them should be happening. Both investigations should be happening. Both levers of our law, of our government, should be at work to prevent, because they're protecting. They have two different objectives. Their job is to protect the Constitution. And their job is to protect democracy.
Exactly. And let's be clear why Marco Rubio is saying that, right? He wants to vote no on impeachment, but he wants Trump to be held accountable, just not him doing it. Because why? Because he's running for re-election in 2 years, and he's
afraid of
Ivanka Trump. So of course he'll never do anything to piss off the Trump. So he's not going to vote to convict Trump. So because he's saying let him go to jail, just as long as I don't have to do anything about it. I mean, it is the ultimate in political cowardice. The ultimate. And look, I get it. Politicians, they have one job: to win elections. I get that. I do understand it. I give politicians a little more leeway than most do. And I think from a political standpoint, I hate to say this, but what they're doing makes sense, right? It's better for them to vote no. It's better for them politically to vote no. I mean, because in the long run, Trump supporters are going to punish them if they vote to convict him. But my God, where do you draw the line? Do you ever draw the line? How you cannot draw a line here and say this goes too far? I just, it's too much. All right, but listen, we've talked enough about public cowardice. Let's talk about something interesting that actually we don't talk very much about. The president, Joe Biden. It's like the guy doesn't even, it's like he's the third or fourth most important story in the country. I swear I've never seen a new president, get less attention than Joe Biden is getting. What is going on here, Cam? Talk to me about this.
It's really strange to think about a time where a president is going about the business of being president, being attentive to the issues and the policies that he wants to implement, especially early on in the first 100 days, and to not be seeking the spotlight every single minute of every single day. It's really remarkable. It's a return to something that seems like normalcy. And despite the fact, here's another thing that's interesting about this, is that you're right. President Biden is not making headlines every day, but what's happening at the White House that's different than in the Trump administration? Daily press briefings.
Yeah, that's right.
They are actually giving information. They're doing daily press briefings. They're doing separate briefings, the administration, on the COVID response. They are trying to work on COVID relief with the Congress. A lot of things are happening. They rolled out a climate plan. They rolled out an economic plan.
Right.
A lot of things are happening, but it's normal. It's not either something that seems like some sort of craven personal political move, and it's not something that seems totally incompetent, like when the former president stood up and suggested that disinfectant could be injected into people
Remember
to
that? Yeah.
kill COVID.
Right.
When those things don't happen, suddenly, it's not as newsworthy.
Right.
It doesn't grab the headlines the same way, especially when it's happening, coinciding with a second impeachment of the former president. So yeah, it's a remarkable thing.
So I think I agree. Obviously, I think everything you said I agree with. But I think the other thing about this that is sort of fascinating to me is that Joe Biden is governing like a progressive. He is unabashedly acting like a progressive. I mean, let's just talk about COVID relief for a second. I mean, he hasn't backed down from $2,000 checks. He hasn't backed down from $15 minimum wage. He is pushing ideas that are, he's pushing a $1.9 trillion stimulus. That's 2 times the size that Obama pushed in 2009.
Yes.
And he's sticking to his guns on this stuff in a way that I think is a little bit unusual for a Democratic president. And he's getting like no backlash from for it. Part of it's because Republicans are such a hot mess right now, right? I mean, if it's not the impeachment, it's Marjorie Greene. They have no message against Biden, nothing that's certainly sticking. And it is just striking that he is sort of saying, I don't care, about the press backlash. I don't care if Republicans are going to say, I'm going to do what I think is best. It is a refreshing moment for progressives, for sure. But in general, I think it's refreshing for every American to see a president who is governing as he sees what he thinks is best for the country. I don't see a lot of evidence of them, thinking about the politics of this stuff in a way where they're afraid to be bold. I don't see that at all, which I think is really unusual for a Democratic president. You didn't see that from Obama, and for reasons that are very different. I mean, Obama was president at a different time. A black man being president, there's a lot more restrictions on what you can do and you can say and how bold you can be. But this is a different president than different Democratic president we've seen maybe ever before.
Yeah, I think I agree largely with what you're saying. I think there are a couple reasons why we're seeing Joe Biden go bold this way, and it's not necessarily just because he thinks that being a progressive is the right thing to do right now. He knows that the American people need help. They want help. Right. They're asking for help. I mean, I think a great example of that was in the Georgia Senate race in the runoff. You saw both Republican candidates back $2,000 checks because they knew that the need for help in this pandemic was something that spanned partisan lines, that everybody wanted that. And Joe Biden he realizes that, and he is pushing, as you said, for that additional $1,400, which with the $600 already that has been passed will equal a $2,000 check. He wants people to get that. He's so far, and Republicans, again, they're offering a package a third of the size, or the bipartisan package is a third of the size of what Joe Biden is pushing. And he is just like, no, we need to go farther on this. He's signaled a willingness that he could hold back on the minimum wage. So that's the only thing that he wants the minimum wage. But if that's going to stop, Joe Manchin, who we're going to probably hear a lot of in the months ahead, from being on board, then he can negotiate that separately.
Right.
But he really is pushing ahead on this because he knows that the nation needs it. Also, when Obama pulled back on stimulus in 2009 in a way that it ended up with a package that was just so insufficient. Joe Biden was there. He saw that. He learned that lesson. Democrats were telling me, folks from the White House were telling me that they know that lesson and they learned that lesson, and they were not going to let Republicans push them to a point of settling for another insufficient package. Certainly not now, when the situation is so much more dire than even during that recession. Well, so, yeah, go ahead.
No, but I think one difference, that between now and '09 that's really important is that I made this point something I wrote about a week or two ago. When Obama became president, there were 13 Democrats in states that John McCain had won, in what was basically a landslide election. In contrast, Joe Biden, there are 3 Democratic senators in states that Joe Biden lost, just 3: Manchin, Tester, and Tester in Montana, and Sherrod Brown in Ohio. So you have a much more liberal caucus in the Senate, and a Democratic caucus much more willing to be bold, right?
Sure.
I mean, one of the reasons why you couldn't get a stimulus bill through with 50 votes is because Democrats wouldn't go along with doing it through budget reconciliation. They wanted Republican support. Most Democrats don't seem to care right now. I mean, Manchin seems to care for performative reasons, same with Kirsten Sinema, but most of them don't care. And they don't want to, and they understand, I think, in a way that I think Obama and Democrats didn't in '09, that what matters is results. People want results. Republicans want to carp about this, fine, but they're not going to let that stop them from doing things. And that is a big moment for Democrats, I think. Now, whether it holds, that's a big question. I don't know that it will. But for now, at least, it seems like a pretty big deal that you've got Democrats much more united. And that's one thing that I think Biden deserves some credit for. One thing you expect with a new president, especially a Democratic president, is liberals to say he's not doing enough.
Yeah.
A little bit, but really none of that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and we may hear more as other policies come to the fore. We may hear more of that. I'm expecting more of that when there's a bigger focus on his climate policy, for example, or other things, or healthcare. We may hear more of that push. But right now, I think when it comes to COVID relief, he has such broad unity on that issue that he's going to have this support. Even Joe Manchin, who is going to Joe Manchin for all the reasons that we said, is fully on board with going big on COVID relief. So I think this is a good, it's not just because it's much needed and Americans need this help, but politically for Joe Biden, it's a positive thing to start on for him if he can do that. If he can also get this vaccine infrastructure working better and working effectively, that's a 1-2 punch. That would be a very good political start to his term in office.
And I think, the other thing too is that they have really pacified, I think, the left with some of the personnel decisions that they've made. I was talking to somebody about this who writes about labor issues and has been part of labor movement for a long time. And he was saying, this is the most pro-labor administration I've seen in a long time. They've done lots of things with their appointments, with some of their early executive orders that have been very solicitous of the labor movement. And I think these guys the Biden people are very professional. They're very smart, and they clearly are thinking about ways to keep their coalition together. And what's impressive to me is they've basically made so many liberal activist groups relatively happy while not creating any kind of political backlash. There's no, and I'm dating myself when I'm in that, there's no Lonnie Guinier situation we had in '93 with Bill Clinton, right? There's nothing like that where they have to backtrack from something because they get pressure from Republicans. That's not happening. And, again, whether it continues, I don't know. And part of it is happening because Republicans are such a mess right now, right? Mm-hmm. They have no coherent message, and they're being attacked for their own problems inside their own coalition, with the Marjorie Greens and so forth. But it is a different kind of thing. And I'm curious to see how long it continues for. But I will say this, if Biden can get this COVID relief measure passed, if the vaccination can get going, and I saw yesterday where Fauci said that, April could be open season for vaccinations. I mean, inshallah, then we really are looking at a presidency that by the summer or fall is going to be looking pretty good to most Americans. I mean, I think that Biden, in a sense, is kind of lucky in a weird way, because a lot of things that are going to make things better in America are happening now, and are happening not just because of what he's doing, but from the COVID relief from December, because of the vaccine, all of those things. So there's a lot of positive stuff for Joe Biden out there right now. A lot of positive stuff.
It's a lot of positives. I mean, I say it is in part because of his election, in large part because of his election, because there was no vaccine infrastructure.
That's true. There was a vaccine administration out there. That's right.
Yeah, the previous administration was so focused on the election, even after the election, that they really were derelict in their duties. And we saw in the reporting when the Biden administration started, how much further behind even they thought
Right.
they were even than they expected. So I think it is a lot of work on the part of folks, but yes, I think um, I agree with everything else that you just said. Yes.
Okay, so we should finish up here, but I want to ask you one question. You are a lawyer and you are a legal observer. So when this comes out today, I'm going to put up later in the day. We're recording it Friday morning. Well, I've already heard from the Trump legal team. What can you give us a preview of what you expect to hear from Bruce Castor and David Schoen? Yeah, David Schoen.
Yes. So essentially, they are falling in two lines here. One is this idea that this proceeding is unconstitutional. We've already had a vote on that. That's already precedent now. The senators ruled that they do have the ability to
Right.
do this trial the same way that they ruled way back with William Belknap that they have the ability to do this trial. The precedent is set.
1876, is that right?
That's correct. Very,
Yes.
very good. So that's a losing argument. What we're going to hear a lot of today is about the First Amendment, this idea that the president was exercising his First Amendment rights at this rally on January 6th, and that prevents him from being held accountable for that. Of course, that is patently false for a number of reasons. We talked about how this was a weeks-long campaign by the president, even longer than that, months long. We've talked about the fact that he was lying about election fraud. The First Amendment does not protect lies. It doesn't. And also he called this crowd to DC. It was not just words, there were actions. He called this crowd to DC and he sicked them on the Capitol, just as falsely shouting fire in a theater, as we all know, is not protected by the First Amendment. Actions like that aren't protected either. So that's also, go ahead.
Can I interject one thing? Also, he was the president. Right. There's a different bar for what the president can say than other citizens can say.
Correct.
I mean, it's insane to say, oh, he's just some guy giving a speech on the mall, right?
No.
President of the United States, for Christ's sake. What are you talking about? Sorry,
Yeah.
I apologize.
No, you're right. He's taken an oath of office that he violated repeatedly.
Yeah.
So yes, the First Amendment is not a defense here. I don't know if there'll be anything else. The reporting is that Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley and others met with the legal team last night, apparently to try to help him out a little bit. So maybe they pull out another defense, but again, it's going to be very difficult to rebut legally what the House managers have laid out. They're going to have to try to give, if they want to win, which it seems like they will, to give the Republicans in the Senate a political reason.
So, and let me ask you one last question, because I know, again, you follow this stuff, you follow legal proceedings pretty closely, much closer than I do, certainly. So I'm curious if you thought Bruce Castor's presentation on Wednesday, was it the worst legal argument you've ever seen, or was it the worst legal argument you've ever seen?
If I had been half that bad as a civil litigator when I was 25 years old and fresh out of law school practicing in Boston, I'd have been fired.
It was, I mean, to call it a dumpster fire seems unfair to dumpster fires. It was extraordinary to watch. It was really amazing thing to watch. It was a disaster. It made no sense at all. And by the way, we diss on Bruce Castor, but David Schoen's presentation was actually not as bad, obviously. It was pretty bad. I mean, the level of contradiction, the way he got into himself, contradicting his own co-counsel, was just, it was mind-boggling, actually, to watch.
Yes. I mean, he succeeded better in the English language. He strung actual sensible, sentences that had a subject and a verb and,
exactly.
It was a little better. But you're right. The legal argument is bad because they know they can't win on that. I think what Castor was trying to do, at least this is pure speculation and me giving him a lot of grace, was to try to give a political argument, just to try to appeal to members of the Senate more and try to say, look, don't get caught up in what you're going to see. It's going to be difficult. You're going to relive this day. It's going to be a lot of emotional stuff, and try not, as difficult as it is, trying to see past this and listen to our defenses. I think that's what he was trying to do, but he ended up sort of not only not making logical sense, but also claiming that essentially the House managers were just being overly emotional, which is a terrible tack to take as well. It was just really bad. I was trying to follow it. I was really trying to follow it, and I couldn't.
I
I
couldn't
think that's
either.
the only thing I tweeted about it. It's like I was trying to follow his train of thought, and I can't.
There was a very funny tweet. I think it was Joan Walsh who said, "Is it possible to get a stroke from watching a speech?" And that was kind of how I felt watching it. So, look, I tried to follow too, and that my brain hurt after a while.
It was so hard.
It was bad. Well, hopefully today will not be as bad. Although for comedic effect, maybe we could hope it is as bad, because it was certainly amusing. And Twitter, as always, I always say this: that's what Twitter was invented for. Was moments like that. Train wrecks like that is when everyone on Twitter tries to one up each other, and it's fun, actually. Even though to watch somebody make a fool of himself, it's not fun for them or fun for the country. But
No,
we need our humor in these dark days. That's all I can say.
you have to get through it the best way you can, Michael.
Exactly. And on that note, Kim, thank you so much as always. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I always enjoy it. And let's good luck with everything going on. I know this is a new gig for you, the new podcast, new column at the Globe. Awesome. And
Yes.
I certainly hope we can do this again sometime soon.
All right. Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
As always. Thank you.